President, in the eyes of the international community, some of your Philippines behavior in recent times, it now sounds like you really consider other parties' comfort level, and there is a risk of ruining the regional long-earned, long-lasting peace.
Any effort to resolve maritime differences in the East China Sea and the South China Sea must be anchored on international law, particularly UNCLOS. So the lines that we draw in our waters are not derived from just our imagination, but from international law. We have defined our territory and maritime zones in a manner befitting a responsible and law-abiding member of the international community. In the West Philippine Sea, we are on the front lines of efforts to assert the integrity of the UNCLOS as a constitution of the oceans. We are not mere bystanders to unfolding world events. We are the actors that drive those events. We are the main characters in our collective story. We are the owners of the narratives of our regional community.
Mr. President, I noticed in your speech you mentioned many times about ASEAN centrality. You review the TAC, which your father signed, that show the bond of ASEAN. I think the ASEAN centrality is very important, but it's not, we cannot take it for granted. It comes from the ASEAN way, three principles. First, mutual respect. Second, consensus building. Third, considerate other parties' comfort level. In my words, to put it simply, we can summarize it as three no's: non-intervention, and non-use of force, and non-hyping up hot spots. Only because of these principles strictly followed by ASEAN members and other stakeholders that we have ensured the ASEAN and East Asia at large for a long-lasting peace since the end of the colonial rules in history. So we cherish a lot. I fully agree with you. I support the centrality of ASEAN. And even some professor like Cashion McBoney, he suggests ASEAN is deserved to award a Nobel Peace Prize. I agree with him.
Thank you very much. I think your question is, do you agree with me? So President Martin,
yes,
please.
My question is, President, in the eyes of the international community, some of your Philippines behavior in recent times, it now sounds like you really consider other parties' comfort level, and there is a risk of ruining the regional long-earned, long-lasting peace since the end of the, colonial history. What's your comments on that? Thank you very much.
Well, I cannot imagine what you must be referring to if the reference or the allusion is to the Philippines somehow tearing apart what we have agreed on with in ASEAN in terms of ASEAN centrality. Quite the contrary. I think if you examine more closely the remarks that I just made, I precisely focus on ASEAN centrality, and that the principles that are laid down that are involved in the concept of ASEAN centrality are some things that we must use to guide us. And if we have been distracted in the past years or so, then it's time for us to return and remember once again what ASEAN was created for. And that is to create an aggregation of nations that have very many common interests, and that can be, and that partnerships within that multilateral organization can help each other and help the region. And so the Philippines is still remains true to the principles that were established and upon which ASEAN was born. And I think, as I said, that many of these things we no longer speak of today, but we must, because they are as relevant today as they ever were, perhaps even more so, because the global situation is a great deal more complicated than it used to be before. I would even go far as to say there is no such thing as a regional issue any longer. We have all experienced the unexpected effects of the war in Ukraine, of the conflict in the Middle East, and all of these. And when we talk about the South China Sea, we have to also remember that the South China Sea is the passageway for half of the world trade, and therefore the peace and stability of the South China Sea and the freedom of navigation of the South China Sea is a world issue. And that is what I am proposing. And I am saying that yes, it is a regional issue, but we must examine and be part of the discussion. We must include all parties in the discussion, because now it is not just ASEAN member states who are stakeholders, and it is quite easy to see that it is in fact the entire world that have become stakeholders in the peace and stability of our region.
President Marcos, I'm going to ask you a very direct question, if you don't mind, which is, if Chinese Coast Guard water cannons killed a Filipino sailor, would that cross a red line? And then can you also give us a sense of what are the actions that would trigger a request from Manila to Washington to invoke the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty?
To go back to the first question, what would happen if an incident that ended up killing a Filipino serviceman, Coast Guard, or in the military and part of the Navy? That would certainly increase the level of response. And if a willful act, not only servicemen, but even a Filipino citizen, if a Filipino citizen is killed by a willful act, that is, I think, very, very close to what we define as an act of war, and therefore we will respond accordingly. And our treaty partners, I believe, also hold that same standard for when the actions, with the joint action, will be undertaken in support of any such incident in the Philippines. We already have suffered injury, but thank God we have not yet gotten to the point where any of our participants, civilian or otherwise, have been killed. But once we get to that point, that is certainly, we would have crossed the Rubicon. Certainly crossed the Rubicon. Is that a red line? Almost certainly it's going to be a red line.
My question relates to your vision for the force posture of the Philippines by the end of your term. So the Philippines has always discussed that the defense of our national territory is primarily our responsibility under the unilateral defense plan. So what specific force packages are you eyeing particularly in the next coming years, and what exactly are we to expect after Horizon 3 of the AFP modernization program?
Thank you. Well, what the gentleman is referring to, the Horizon 3 acquisition program, is our Department of National Defense has just completed. Then we are presently in the process of finding suppliers for all the different requirements that we have to build up our capabilities in the armed forces of the Philippines, and that we are hoping that these acts are just a deterrence, and we, as they say, to work for peace, prepare for war, and it is an unfortunate truth, but and that is why we have undertaken this long-term, it has been going on for many years now, this long-term plan of increasing the capabilities of our military and our civilians, such as the Coast Guard in the Philippines. I thank the International Institute for Strategic Studies for convening this open, frank, and constructive conversation on pressing strategic issues confronting our region. We Filipinos are paragons of this dream. Our history reflects our commitment to the values that engender amity, fraternity, and sovereign equality amongst nations. Our commitment to peace and to the rule of law inheres in how we have defined our sovereign home. When we established our Commonwealth in 1935, we put together a constitution that defined our territory in accordance with the international treaties that became the basis of our archipelagic unity. The Treaty of Paris between Spain and the United States crystallized our islands into a cohesive whole. The Treaty of Washington clarified the extent of our sovereignty and patrimony and a line set by international powers. We sought to uphold and preserve the integrity of our country's physical unity through international law. Together with others, we put forward the Archipelagic Doctrine, which regards all archipelagic states as a single unit, with the waters around, between, and connecting their islands, irrespective of their breadth and dimension, forming part of their internal waters. This doctrine has since been enshrined in the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or the UNCLOS. The same convention also clarified the limits of each state's maritime zones and defined the extent with which they could exercise sovereignty, their sovereign rights, and jurisdiction over those zones. Accordingly, we have made a conscious effort to align our definition of our territory and our maritime zones with what international law permits and recognizes. This has been inscribed in Article 1 of our Constitution. As President, I look forward to signing our Maritime Zones Law, which will clarify the geographic extent of our maritime domain. Our efforts stand in stark contrast to assertive actions that aim to propagate excessive and baseless claims through force, intimidation, and deception. In the West Philippine Sea, we are on the front lines of efforts to assert the integrity of the UNCLOS as a constitution of the oceans. We have defined our territory and maritime zones in a manner befitting a responsible and law-abiding member of the international community. We have submitted our assertions to rigorous legal scrutiny by the world's leading jurists. So the lines that we draw in our waters are not derived from just our imagination, but from international law. We have on our side the 1982 UNCLOS and the binding 2016 Arbitral Award, which affirms what is ours by legal right. In this solid footing and through our clear moral ascendancy, we find the strength to do whatever it takes to protect our sovereign home, to the last square inch, to the last square millimeter. The life-giving waters of the West Philippine Sea flow in the blood of every Filipino. We cannot allow anyone to detach it from the totality of the maritime domain that renders our nation whole. As President, I have sworn to this solemn commitment from the very first day that I took office. I do not intend to yield. Filipinos do not yield. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not only unyielding in protecting our patrimony, our rights, and our dignity as a proud and as a free country. We are also firm in our commitment to regional and global peace. We renew this commitment at this turbulent juncture of our history. I will repeat what I said at the United Nations almost 2 years ago. Amidst challenging global tides, an important ballast stabilizes our common vessel. Our open, inclusive, and rules-based international order is governed by international law and informed by the principles of equity and of justice. For the past 79 years, this rules-based order has allowed our region to flourish. The stability and the predictability that it has engendered has been crucial to the success of the stories of our region. In 1982, we led our global community in unanimously adopting the Manila Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of Disputes. This affirmed that differences amongst nations must always be solved peacefully through legal and diplomatic processes, never through the threat or the use of force. Today, these norms are under significant stress. The world is facing a watershed moment. In our region, recent patterns of aggression and militarization and emerging arms races threaten our lands of promise with an uncertain future. In the midst of these significant shifts, I see 7 realities in the Indo-Pacific. First, the future of our region will be determined by many nations, each with its own unique experiences and aspirations. Yet, their respective agencies are being challenged by attempts to undermine our faith in prevailing international norms. Second, the strategic competition between China and the United States is permeating the evolving regional landscape. This rivalry is constraining the strategic choices of regional states. This contest is exacerbating flashpoints and has created new security dilemmas. Third, the region looks to ASEAN as the institution that will hold the center amidst these evolving dynamics. Yet, challenges threaten our unity and our centrality. Fourth, as geopolitics continues to permeate the global governance infrastructure, the role of bridge builders have become increasingly important to forge decisive multilateral solutions. Fifth, the global commons will continue to be crucial to the security of all states in the region. Access of developing countries to the high seas and to outer space and the peaceful uses of science and technologies is crucial to international development. Sixth, climate change remains a deadly challenge for the region and for the world. It is the first truly global threat, and for the first time, we face a crisis that affects every single human being on Earth and requires action from every single human being as well. And finally, the development of advanced technologies is rapidly transforming human life and experience. These technologies will solve many of our old problems, but they are so powerful that they also have the potential to disrupt our political and our social orders. These 7 realities muddle the waters that we have to navigate in our collective journey as a community of nations. We cannot reverse course. We must persevere. We must push through. The current juncture does not call for a revision of the regional order. Instead, it calls for the reaffirmation of the wisdom of San Francisco in 1945, of Bangkok in 1967, and of Manila in 1982. Let us return to San Francisco and reaffirm the sovereign equality of all states. We must reject unjust narratives that seek to subsume distinct national interest in a so-called major country dynamic, which seeks to impose a hierarchy amongst nations. Those who came before us worked painstakingly throughout the last century to bury the era of spheres of influence and of buffer states. We should not allow its ghost to haunt our region once again. Let us also return to Bangkok and support ASEAN's effort to build a rules-based, people-oriented, and centered on regional community. Any state that professes a stake in the continued peace and stability of this region must respect ASEAN centrality, not only with words, but with action. All partnerships and arrangements must never displace or dilute, but rather uphold and complement ASEAN's central role. So let us return as well to Manila and reaffirm our common understanding of how international law governs the peaceful settlement of disputes. Amidst misleading narratives that seek to discredit international legal procedures, there is a need to reaffirm those modalities are an expression of good faith. They are a service to the progressive development and codification of international law. They are never an unfriendly act. Ladies and gentlemen, the past inspires the needed clarity and foresight to confront the challenges of the present and to build a future to which we all aspire. From the achievements of San Francisco, Bangkok, Manila, we as a region draw our abiding compass. First, the sovereign equality of states must remain sacrosanct. Second, ASEAN and ASEAN-led processes must remain central. Third, the rule of law and the integrity of multilateralism must prevail. These three constants guide our efforts to prepare ourselves for the challenges ahead. We need to begin by resoundingly rejecting misguided interpretations that paint our region as a mere theater of geopolitical rivalries. We are not mere bystanders to unfolding world events. We are the actors that drive those events. We are the main characters in our collective story. We are the owners of the narratives of our regional community. Thus, we reject any attempt to deny strategic agencies, especially by force, that seek to subordinate our interests to anyone else's. China's determining influence over the security situation and the economic evolution of this region is a permanent fact. At the same time, the stabilizing presence of the United States is crucial to regional peace. It's never a choice. Both countries are important. The continued stability of this region requires China and the United States to manage that rivalry in a responsible manner. Any effort to resolve maritime differences in the East China Sea and the South China Sea must be anchored on international law, particularly UNCLOS. We must accord due regard to the legitimate interests of all parties and respect legally settled rights. We cannot afford any other future for the South China Sea other than the one envisioned by ASEAN, that of a sea of peace, stability, and prosperity. Unfortunately, this vision remains for now a distant reality. Illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive actions continue to violate our sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdictions. Attempts to apply domestic laws and regulations beyond one's territory and jurisdiction violate international law, exacerbate tensions, and undermine regional peace and security. But despite all this, the Philippines remains committed to the cause of peace upon which our constitutional order is premised. We are committed to addressing and managing difficult issues through dialogue and through diplomacy. The 1982 UNCLOS and the binding 2016 Arbitral Award provide a solid foundation for the peaceful resolution and management of disputes. Ladies and gentlemen, beyond the regional horizon, we recognize the importance of upholding multilateralism. It remains the single viable platform for collective action against transcendent global challenges. We must therefore step back from the precipice of paralysis. We should transcend geopolitics, find common ground, work to strengthen global institutions. The Indo-Pacific holds much promise as the fastest growing economic hub and the largest contributor to global growth. That premise must be kept alive. Furthermore, that promise must be fulfilled. Geopolitics must not distract us from our fundamental duty as civil servants, as public intellectuals, as statesmen, to deliver for our people and to safeguard the future of the coming generations. This is the reason why we strive for stability, for security, and for peace. This, ladies and gentlemen, is our core purpose, our collective commitment, our calling. It is for this most noble of causes that we must come together to win the future of our region and to make a better world. And with your help, with our partnerships, with the alliances that we forge, we will make it happen. Thank you and good evening.